Welcome, everybody. I'm Susan Rook-Diatori, and this is the No Pants Show, where we go live in the No Pants open community on Facebook and talk about everything freelancing. I want you to enjoy someone who I already enjoy, Peter Manktelow. So, Pete, did I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Manktelow.
See, now I always do that. You got locked in my head that way wrong.
That's all right.
Now it's like,
everyone gets it wrong the first time.
Well, I was actually practicing. So, what can I say? There's absolutely no excuse. So I want to talk first about your website. Okay.
Sure.
Doing research on you, I went and I looked at your website, and you had said that there was kind of nothing there. I looked. You have a beautiful picture of an antique typewriter, and there is nothing there.
Right.
So talk about that.
Sure. So the reason I don't have a website is because the majority of my clients come from either me doing outreach, right? So cold outreach. It's not people finding me, right? It's either that or it's referral basis, right? So early in my freelance career, I started on, and we're talking 2006, I started on bid sites looking for jobs and content mills looking for jobs. And those obviously didn't require a website. And at no point along the way in my journey did I feel like I really needed a website in order to attract clients. And I think that's proven itself true, right? So I've never felt a need to have one. At some point in the future, when I feel like scaling or building a personal brand, which is also something I don't feel like doing right now because I don't like to put my face out there as the face of things, right? So I'm a very introverted. I don't want to be a public figure. So if you look at somebody like Mike Shreve, I don't think he wants to do that either, but he has goals in life that require him to go out and, be the face of something. Right. I don't have goals so I don't have the need to make for myself or the desire to make for myself something like an 8-figure business. Right. I don't need $10 million in gross revenue and all of the things that go along with it. Managing people, managing a business, all those things. I like to sit in the background behind people's brands. And I found the best way to get that type of client is through referrals. It's not, and you can do it other ways, and we can talk about the other ways that you could do it. There are other strategies that would work. But at this point, I feel like I don't really need a website. And I put it there just in case somebody Googles me. They can get my email address and they can send me an email, right? So right now it's parked so that if in the future I would like to use my name, right? And I have both Peter and Pete Manktelow parked as domains, I can use one of those, to build a brand. But right now, I haven't felt it necessary, right? So in my client attraction or client getting methods haven't required having a website. Also, we talked a little bit about this before we started and went live, but I think a lot of people, and this happened to me, I stress about what am I going to put on the website, right? What am I going to do? And it becomes, I think for a lot of people, it becomes a roadblock that stands in the way of what they actually need to do to get started freelancing or to get started getting clients, right? So I'm all about simplifying processes, simplifying things for me. And for me, it just works not having a website, or having just a one-line website.
I love that. So a couple people, Steve is focused on the guitars. Welcome, Steve. Thank you for joining us. And no pressure here, Pete, but Mike Shreve is also joining us.
He says that beard.
Yeah.
I see him. Yeah, I just had it trimmed, Mike, just for you, just for this.
Nicely done. So I know that some people are going to think, oh, well, Pete's been doing it for 12 years. I haven't been doing it professionally for 12 years. It's okay that he doesn't have a website, but what about me?
Sure.
So talk to the people who are in the early stages who are saying, I'm a fantastic writer. I love to write. Now, what do I do?
Sure. What do you do if you don't want to worry about having a website? Or
Well, kind of both the same thing.
Well, here's the first
I
thing.
just know somebody's going, well, he might not need a website because
Yeah, I understand. You're starting from scratch. I get it.
yeah.
Yeah. So here's the big point that I would say to any new freelancer who's going to offer a service. Your website is there to talk about you, right? That's what it's there to do. It's there to prove that you are the person who can help them. It's there to talk about your accomplishments. It's there to show your samples. It's there to maybe show pricing, all these things that you think need to be on your website, right? And it's great to have. It's awesome to have that sort of thing. But here's what I'll say about that. Early on in the client getting process, no one cares about you, right? So no one really cares about who you are. No one really cares about what your accomplishments are. No one cares about what your degree is in or what you've done or what your case studies are. All they care about is what you can do for them, right? Because people in business and people, when they get anything or when they spend money on anything, they're really only concerned about themselves, their needs, their problems that they have. And as freelancers, we're problem solvers. So as long as you can approach someone and say, look, I recognize that you have a problem. Let's talk about it, right? I recognize that you have a problem. Let's talk about more in depth. Let's talk about what that problem is. Let's talk about how to solve it. And let me give you some specific recommendations on how I can help you. So you're focused on them. You're not focused on yourself. And I think a big mistake a lot of people make is they focus too much on themselves instead of focusing on who their prospect or the prospective client is. And, in the grand scheme of things, I think the website, it's something that focuses on you instead of on your client. I don't think you necessarily need to have something crazy and something fancy in order to convince people that you can help them, right? Because it is about them. It's not necessarily about you. Does the website help in some aspects, in some ways explain how you can solve problems? Sure. But is it really needed? No. So there's that step one of it. And so if you're just starting, what I would recommend doing is, and this is how I would just start, if you have the competence and confidence in your skill as a freelancer, that's the first thing. Developing a competence in how to deliver your service, right? And then the confidence to approach someone and say, look, you have a problem. I know how to solve that problem. Let's solve it, right? With this service that I offer. That's first, once you have that base of knowledge. The second thing to do is basically just be quiet, or approach somebody, talk to them, be quiet and listen for what their problems are. Tell them that you understand what they are, and then tell them, hey, I can solve those, right? And having a website is not required to do that, right? So.
Absolutely. Now, Anna, I think, is speaking for a lot of people. She's never actually helped someone with the problems.
Sure.
So she's concerned that she wants to solve based on her personal skills assessment.
Mm-hmm.
She knows what kind of results she thinks that she can get someone, but she can't go and say, I know I can do this. You have a problem. I can solve it by doing this.
Right.
What does she do?
So she doesn't feel, you're saying, what's the specific question? She doesn't feel as if...
She says, I have an idea that I can write awesome content for their blog or email, that they can get more customers and make more money. But without experience, how do I translate that into numbers that the client can then use to decide if the service is worth it to them? Sure.
Okay. In this case, what I do is, because you're not always going to have numbers. And I think that's the crux of this question is we talk a lot in freelancing about, it's a term that Mike uses called case study stacking, right? So you have a client, you have a successful case study with that client, and then you can approach more clients and say, look, I've done this in the past, right? And you can build those successes. She doesn't have that ability to do it because it's first client. I think the crux is numbers, right? And what I would recommend doing is instead of focusing on numbers, right? That's obviously a very valuable thing that you can provide. You focus on value in other aspects of business, because it's not, for a business owner, the numbers don't just represent a direct return on investment or return on spend. Numbers can also be time saved. Numbers can be new perspective, not numbers, but value can also be time saved. It can represent new ideas and new perspectives, new excitement, a new fire like lit underneath the business owners, behind, right, to get them moving. It can represent injecting that into a business, right? The reason that freelancers get hired is not just to make the concrete numbers increase, as in, I'm going to send traffic to this blog post and it is going to get this much more engagement, or I am going to have you write a sales letter and it's going to convert this much higher. Oftentimes freelancers get hired so that business owners can take themselves out of some of the aspects that they see as mundane, or they can get new ideas when they are out of ideas, right? Sometimes freelancers are hired, and often I believe they're hired for those reasons, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you want to live a life that is, or you want to have a business where you work on it, right, instead of in it. And we hire freelancers to work in our businesses so we can work on the higher, and them talking as the client, we can work on the higher level ideas that are going to help our businesses be successful, right? So I don't think that clients are necessarily all focused on numbers, right? That's how I would approach it. I would approach, what are the ways that you can provide value that are, I don't have a case study, be honest with them, right? But what I can do is I can bring new ideas and new perspectives into your business, because I can see that you have the problem of your ideas being tired, and it takes a lot of time for you to generate these new ideas, time that you don't want to spend, right?
So do you actually criticize the client and say, like, tired, or do you kind of couch it and say, maybe your ideas are just resting?
So with clients, I'm a very abrasive personality. And that's an approach that I've decided to take, right? So I will approach clients with brutal honesty and tell them my opinion. And if they don't like it, that's fine. There are more clients, right? And the reason that I do that comes down to who you want to work with. And the type of people that I want to work with, I don't want to leave anything on the table, right? I don't want to have a retainer agreement with somebody and then be thinking month to month, oh, am I still going to be around and not sure? I'm going to want them to honestly tell me, look, you're not delivering what we expect you to deliver. And if I can set that expectation in the relationship and work with somebody who's kind of a kindred spirit as far as communication is concerned, I'm going to have a better time working for them. I'm going to have, a better relationship with them, which is going to lead to all sorts of positive benefits for both of us, right? So, I don't try to hide what my personality is with clients, because that's hard. That's more work for me to do, right? And
once that stuff starts getting glommed up, it's so much more difficult to unglom it. Than it is to do it from the start. But I think a lot of new freelancers end up getting in a situation where they didn't know how to set the boundaries, or this is what I need from you in terms of communication, and here's how I want this to look, in part because we're new. How did you do that when you were just starting out?
So one of the advantages that everybody in this group has that I didn't have was somebody to follow, right? So I had no clue what I was doing when I started at all, right? So I did not do it the quickest way in the world, right? I did not do it the fastest way. So we're talking about going from 2006, writing for a bid site while I was in college, right? So I was in college, I needed some extra money. I was a history major. I knew how to write, right? Because that's what you learn how to do as a history major. You learn how to write lots of stuff. You learn how to write what the professor wants on a piece of paper and you turn it in. That's very similar to a client freelancer relationship, because early on in your freelance career, you learn what the client wants, you write it on a piece of paper, you turn it in, right? So I'm like, I can do this. Where do I find clients? And you Google, where do I find freelance writing clients? And what pops up? At the time, Elance pops up, right? At the time, Constant Contact or whatever, all the other mills pop up. Is it Constant Contact? I don't know. I can't remember. And then there's one that pays pennies per word. So I started by doing that, right? And then it was a process of gradually meeting people, learning how to approach people, to pitch yourself, right? Learning how to sell yourself, and then sort of niching down or getting down what your service is and what it is that you do for clients over a period of years, right? So I don't know, I forget what our beginning question was, but it's like, how did I start? It was a much longer process. And it's because I never sought out mentorship. I never sought out learning experiences. I never bought a course on how to be a freelancer. I never bought a course on how to write better content. I didn't do it until after I had experiences working that basically arose out of nowhere, right? Like it's just, you meet the right client and you're in the right place at the right time, and then it happened. But I can tell you that even without all of that, right? So even without the learning experiences, there are enough clients out there to sustain you with a reasonable income, even if you don't like invest a penny in building your freelance career, right? And learning what you need to do. So it was a long process, right? But
so talk to David Price, who says,
sure.
how does a ranked beginner prove they are qualified to help without some personal information? Seems to me a website would work better for people who are starting out than for someone who is more experienced. I know you talked about this at the very beginning,
Yeah,
but it was so valuable, Pete, that you've got to say it again, please,
yeah.
because people are
So
joining us.
what I do is, or what I recommend is, you have to approach the client with their problems in mind instead of what you have to offer in mind. And then you craft what you have to offer based on the problems that they articulate to you, right? So how does a rank beginner, how does someone who has no experience at all approach a client and say, hey, I can help you? The way you do it without a website, the way you do it without a history of helping people is, you, number one, you have something that you know you can deliver, that you're confident in being able to deliver. In this case, it may be, I'm just going to use an example, it may be something that I do. I understand fitness, I understand health, I understand wellness, I understand exercise physiology, right? So I'm going to approach people who have those types of businesses, who require my type of knowledge and my understanding of exercise, health, wellness, and exercise physiology. I'm going to approach those people and I'm going to say, here's what I have to offer. I have this passion for this industry. I have this knowledge of the vertical that your business is in. And then you recognize, you identify what the problems they face are. You ask them what problems they face in their business, and then you say, okay, here is how you can use my knowledge and my experience and my passion to solve those problems. So it's less about you, right, and more about them. And I think the website is, it's all about you often, right? Because, and I said this at the beginning, and I think this is the point that you're getting at, people who hire you initially do not care who you are. They do not care about what your accomplishments are. You could be the most accomplished freelance copywriter or freelance writer, freelance content creator, freelance graphic designer, freelance interview expert in the world. You could have interviewed presidents, right? But no one cares until they see that you, number one, understand the problems that they face, and number two, you have a passion for solving that problem, and you're willing to pour that passion and your experience into their business, right?
Oh, you are speaking right to the website and the business that I'm
So,
setting up right now.
right.
And I also have to tell you, that's how I got my first job in television. I had not studied television in college. I
Sure.
graduated, but I was selling handbags and accessories. Happened to meet the news director of the local station while, you know, doing volunteer work, and pestered him for 3 solid months by watching every single broadcast, going in with a list of all the things that
Right.
I thought he was doing wrong with his broadcast and solutions. And he eventually hired me.
It's very interesting, isn't it? And I think this is a process that it works not just for freelancing, or a premise that works in freelancing. All of every career, all of life works that way. I had a college professor when I was in graduate school who said to me, and I was working on a bunch of things at the same time, right? I was a coach at the college I was working at. I was an assistant coach. I was a TA for a class. I had a graduate fellowship from my graduate degree. I was writing a master's thesis. I was freelancing on the side, right? I was doing all these things. And he said to me, you know, what we do now at the time, it's like, what we do now, or what you do now, is what we all do, which is you bust your butt for a very short amount of time so that you can have success later in life that comes easy, right? And I think that that's what happens early on in a freelance career. You may need to spend 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 90 days or whatever the case is really busting your butt to get your chops up, right? And to reach out to people and identify what they need, right? Maybe it's cold outreach. Maybe you send emails out to people you've identified who may need your help as a freelancer, right? You bust your butt to send out things. Maybe you write some spec samples, which are really, really frowned upon in the freelance world, but it's something that I believe in, right? You identify a client and, hey, what type of sample do you need? Because you don't have a portfolio, and you write something on spec for them, and you bust your butt to do it. But it all pays off in the long term, right? Because you get a better understanding by asking what they need, and by communicating with them, and by going out there and putting yourself out there. Even if you have no experience, you get a better understanding of what your market needs and what you need to deliver, where your skill gaps are and your proficiency gaps are, so that you can, get up to speed. Because even with the no's, even with the you don't have enough experience, or I didn't see this in you, because you ask why when people don't hire you, right? Even with those gaps, even with those things that'll happen, the no's that happen, you recognize where you need to develop as a freelancer in order to be successful. So it's a matter of, I think, freelance careers are built by people who bust their butts for a few weeks, and then they're set until they decide to bust their butts again to get to the next level, right? I really think that's what it is. In a lot of the stories you hear about people becoming freelancers are really, that's the case, right? They decided they wanted to get to the next level of freelancing or to start a career. They put a lot of intensive work into it for a few months, and then they're set, right?
And you're right, that goes across anything.
Sure.
For example, you don't just wake up one day and run the Boston Marathon,
Right.
or, hike the Appalachian Trail. You train for these things, and then you go and do it. So I think that makes sense. You answered Nancy's question, by the way, who wants to know, what do you do if you are asked to show samples of your writing?
Oh, I think that's an important point.
Yeah.
What I actually do, and a lot of people frown on this, right? So this is advice that runs counter to and I saw an article shared this morning in my newsfeed that said 10 freelance mistakes you never want to make. So this is something that other people will tell you not to do, but I say do it. So take this for what it is, right? And I'll tell you why I say do it, is writing spec pieces. Right. So a spec piece is something that you write on spec from the client. So they say, hey, do you have any samples? And you say, what are you looking for? They tell you what they're looking for, and then you create what they're looking for and you give it to them. And the reason you're not supposed to do it is because they're getting work for free. And people say it sets a bad precedent. Well, what I say is that it allows you to develop a portfolio that's specific to what your target prospect, your potential client, it's specific to what they're likely to need. So a lot of people in their freelance career, they learn how to provide a service, then they create a portfolio of samples, then they go look for clients. My argument is, why don't you create the samples while looking for clients, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and then you end up with a portfolio that's a lot better than one you would have created on your own in a vacuum, right? You're creating it with the client's needs in mind, your target market's needs in mind specifically. And you're likely to get feedback on it, because if they hire you, they liked it. If they didn't hire you, it needs work, right? So I'm all about condensing the steps. So that's why I recommend writing spec pieces. A lot of people frown on it because it's free work. A lot of people say that it sets a bad example with clients, but the quality of client that you're looking for is not a client who's just going to steal your work, right, and not pay you for it. Right.
And you wouldn't want that type of client in a long-term relationship anyway.
Right.
So it's okay to do a one-off, and some of these will tank, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming so. Yeah. And in some of them, I mean, you're not going to be a good fit for every client. I'm not a good fit for every client, right? There are some things that clients want done that I don't do it that way. Right. And just as an example, I have very specific things that I like to see from potential clients when I come on and do a project for them. one of the things, and this is just from a copywriting perspective, one of the things that I want to know, if I'm going to provide something like an email newsletter on a regular basis, or I'm going to write a launch for them, like a launch sequence of emails or a video sales letter or a sales letter, I want to know what their audience is like. So I suggest often sending out a deep dive survey or something of the nature to their list, to their audience, to get a picture of what their audience looks like, right? One of the challenges that I've run into is a lot of clients feel like they know who their audience is, so they don't want to take my recommendation and send out this survey. If they don't, I just tell them we're not a good fit to work together because I can't write for your audience if you're not going to do this, right? So, I mean, not everybody's made to work together, right? And then that goes both ways. Me with clients and clients with you.
Jody Aberdeen is creating a new target market. So
Sure.
a lot of people in the No Pants Open community are looking, and part of being here and part of going through the No Pants Project is trying out a lot of things and seeing what works, what's a good fit for you, etc.
Sure.
So he's talking about a new niche, college educated, book coaching. He says, as such, I was trying to enhance my qualifications and achievements, but I suppose they're still going to care about the same things as any other client base. Jody, I'm going to tell you what Pete said at the very beginning of the No Pants show. No one cares. No one cares about you. No one cares. They just don't care. That sounds awful, doesn't it?
People are very, so I use this philosophy in just about everything. So what I do as a copywriter is I write words that sell stuff. I put words in people's mouths that sell things, right? That's basically it. And when I think this is a human, it's a thing that everybody does, is people act on almost everything in life out of their emotions and what they care about, right? And that's from hiring a freelancer to buying a new car, to deciding which brand of pasta you're going to buy. Am I going to buy the grocery store brand? Am I going to buy the Wegmans brand pasta? Or am I going to buy the Barillo brand pasta with extra protein, right? It's an emotional decision that you're making. It's not a practical decision that you're making. One is 50 cents and the other is $1.89, right?
Although with pasta, I have to tell you, if you get Guglielmo's pasta at Wegmans, that one, you can actually taste the difference.
Sure.
A friend of mine created the pasta.
Sure. But it's the taste of the difference is an emotional, subjective feeling that you're feeling deep down. It's not an objective thing that's measurable. Tasting the difference is something that you feel inside of you, right? Something that you care about that somebody else might not care about. I know a guy that he eats all of his dinners in 5 minutes and just scarfs it down, and he's happy to go to, a Texas Hot's place and get hamburgers every night, right? So it's like he doesn't care, right? So I think for a lot of us and a lot of clients hiring people, they're still operating from that emotional state where they just really care about themselves, right? They're not, and it goes even deeper with that. When you're setting up your freelance business and you're communicating with clients, they don't really care that much about you, right? It's in life. I mean, there are people who are going to, if you don't dictate the process that you're going to use to go through life, other people are going to dictate it for you, and they don't care about who you are, right? And that goes down to everything in life, right? But I just know when you sell things, when you sell yourself, the biggest mistake you can make is focus on yourself instead of focusing on the person that you're talking to, right?
What do you do if the person that you're trying to talk to isn't giving you answers? What do you do then?
They'll almost always give you answers, because all you have to do is be quiet and let them talk, right? So let me just explain. This is client getting process 101, what a lot of people teach to get clients in the freelancing world via cold outreach, right? So you send out cold outreach or you meet somebody new. A lot of times a popular strategy is attending a professional conference or attending a training event, meeting people. Another popular strategy is cold emailing, right? So you create a list of people who you want to contact, who you'd really like to work for, and you contact them. Then you create some sort of, I call it an open loop, but it's like a statement that tries to get them to take the next step with you and to ask you more, right? Either via email or a phone call, whatever the case may be. Something is inside of them, that you've said, and it's triggered by what you said in your outreach or your conversation at a presentation, at a conference, whatever the case may be. Something that you've given them, that you've told them, has lit a spark in their curiosity. And your goal in the next step is to figure out what that was, right? And so if you get to the next step, the point where you're trying to stop and listen to what they have to say, because the first part, the cold outreach part, or the I met you at a conference and we had a conversation, you're just guessing what their problems are, and you'll get close. You can get close by looking right at your market and what they need. You can get close. The next step is to get specific. And if they've decided to take that next step and have a conversation with you, they have something specific in mind, right? So they almost always have something. And the strategy that you use to get that out, and the mistake that a lot of people make, is talking too much, right? The strategy you use to get it out is just shut your mouth. You ask, you shut your mouth, and you let them talk. If you give somebody who has a problem an open forum to try to solve that problem or discuss it, they'll talk all day, right? If they don't have a problem to talk about, if they just want to know, I just write it off and move on to the next one.
Gotcha. So we've got a ton of questions from
Okay.
people.
Yeah, let's go through it. I talk quite a bit, so.
No, you're great. I told everybody in the promos for you, I said, listen, this is stuff that you are going to be able to take action on today or tomorrow.
Sure.
Stuff that you hear today, you will immediately be able to use. So fine, you're doing great. Suzanne wants to know, what do you ask in the deep dive survey?
Oh, what do I ask? It depends on the audience. So what I do is, this is working with a new client, right? So the deep dive survey is I found a new client to work for, or a new client has found me, and they would like me to write something for their audience that gets their audience to take action, which is what I do, right? Words that get people to act, words that sell stuff, right? So I need to take the people that are already following them, and I need to guide them through a sales process that convinces them to buy a product or an offer. Before I even look at the offer, before I even look at the product, I want to know what makes up that audience's, what's informing that audience's worldview. What is their, I say the word cosmology, but what's the makeup of their thoughts and opinions? What are they using to inform those thoughts and opinions? Because I'm a believer in the way that we think about the world, right? And the problems that we identify as problems we want solved, those things are created not by us, but by the things and external forces around us. So when it comes to the questions, what I'm looking for is, what are the external things that are informing their worldview, their opinions, their problems that they see in their lives that this particular client of mine may be able to solve? I'm asking the audience things like, what books are you reading? I'm asking them directly, what are your concerns that I think you can, that I can help with? What are the concerns that you have that you think I can help with, right? You're asking them sort of these open-ended questions almost. Some of them, I've done multiple choice, but I often, what books are you reading, is a big one. Who are the other people that you listen to, in the space that you're working in? If it's fitness, where are the other places you go for workout or nutrition advice? And what I do from there is, you'll see popular trends emerge, and you can ask people directly what their concerns are and things like that. But you'll see popular trends emerge in the sources where they get their information, the places where they get advice. And then you can go to those places while doing research for your client to better understand the mindset and the mentality that the audience you have to write for, that you have to convince to buy something. You can better understand the mentality and mindset that they have when they approach this product that you're about to pitch to them. So those are the types of questions I ask them.
Oh, that's brilliant. Is this what is called top of mind?
I don't know.
Because a copywriting coach was trying to teach me top of mind, and I wasn't getting my mind around it. But so I'm going to go back and check with him, because
who was it that was trying to teach it?
So Stephen wants to know, what other rules do you break? Oh, and Suzanne said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Suzanne. What other rules do I break? Oh, that's a good one. I can't think of any off the top of my head. You'd have to give me a list of rules and I could tell you that, which ones were broken. Um, People say not to give away free stuff, right? I give away way too much free stuff. And I'm doing that based on what is called the law of reciprocity, or the rule of reciprocity. Robert Cialdini's, I think it's Psychology of Persuasion, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, that book. And it's the first chapter of that book. I always give away way too much, right? So I will actually, I'll tell a client how to do everything to the point where they could hire someone else to do it, right? And I'll actually tell them, you can hire, and I'll do this often in a proposal or in a conversation before they've paid me. I'll say, here's what I think you should do. You have a couple choices here. You can do it yourself. You can hire someone else for less money to do it, or you can hire me to do it. And I might be more expensive, but I came up with it. So who do you think's going to, right, do a better job of this? And you've laid out everything. Here you go. And
you also like short-circuited the, hey, Pete, I want to pay you 50% less than what you're asking for, because then you can go back and say option two, one or two, you can do it,
yeah,
or you can hire someone less.
It's fine, right?
Brilliant.
So I often give away way too much, and I try to let, and you use that as a way to pitch yourself, right? But I think reciprocity is very, very, it's very powerful. So there are still people, and it works both ways. So I'm thinking about it in terms of, there are some people that I write for right now and I do things for at a lower rate than I probably should, but it's because I feel like they've given me a lot, right? So I feel like they've given, and I'm just thinking about this through my own psychology. There are people in life, in business, in writing, in whatever the case may be, that I do things for where I'm probably not getting paid enough, but I do it because they've given me a lot and they've built up a great relationship with me as a freelancer, that sort of thing. So it works both ways. I try to create a strong initial and strong continuing relationship with clients so that they feel like I'm contributing a lot to their business. So they feel like I am always going to give them more. I'm always going to over deliver. So that's one place I think I break the rules, because a lot of people say, don't give things away for free up front. That goes to the spec pieces. That goes to the reciprocity thing I'm talking about. The other thing that I often do is, as long as I trust the client, I don't ask for payment up front. I don't. And lots of people say, thirds, or they say 50-50, right? If I feel like I trust the client, I'll just do the work, and then the end of the month, I'll send an invoice, or when it's done, I'll send an invoice. Here you go. And I'll even deliver it before I get paid, right? And I have never had a problem getting paid, ever. So there has never been a case where someone has not paid me and I've had to pressure them to pay an invoice. So I think a lot of things that are like steadfast rules in freelancing, I believe a lot of them are overblown, or a lot of them are focused on people going after a lower caliber client, right?
And when you nickel and dime someone, I think that's one way to run your business,
Sure.
Right? And everybody runs their business in different ways. But I think if you end up nickel and diming someone, then you end up with a nickel and dime client who's going to be nickel and diming you back. And that just, God, that's an icky relationship.
Yeah, it's no good. I think about my relationships with clients as, I try to not just provide valuable advice, but I also try to develop friendships with them. I mean, honestly, I always try to start. So a lot of my clients I meet with on a regular basis, I always try to have a little bit of conversation or small talk about things in life. How are your kids? What's going on? This sort of thing, right? So that you can have a connection that's separate from the work. And I found that it's worked really well for me. But yeah, other rules that I break, I wouldn't be able to tell you specifically. And it could be because I'm less studied than some people in what the rules should be.
I love that. I love
Because
that.
a lot of the advice that I give, it's not coming from, some of it comes from books, some of it comes from study, some of it comes from people that I've learned from, but a lot of it is just like, hey, this is what works for me, right? So it may run counter to other advice, and I always try to tell people that, because there's one way of doing, there's more than one way of doing things.
And remember, as with all advice, use what you can use,
Sure.
lose the rest,
Right.
and try it out, test it out, see if it works for you. I want to circle back to the reciprocity and the working on spec.
Yep.
Justin Boyer, who also has a ton of high dollar clients, he works 3 days a week so he can
Sure.
volunteer.
Well, I'm
2 days
jealous.
a week. So, and he's a new freelancer, right? So he
Right.
is just, he took the No Pants Project, applied all of the lessons, and is just crushing it.
Sure.
He talks about continuing to do work for basically pennies
Mhm.
on a site where he's getting tons of high dollar leads.
Sure.
But the work itself ends up being marketing. He talked about it in terms of being strategic. So when you say give away work, you're not saying just go blanket everybody, walk around the neighborhood and say,
Right.
you want me to write something for you? Want me to write something for you? Talk us through your process of how you figure out how to do this strategically.
Sure. If you're going to give away work in order to get work, basically. So what I'm looking to do when I give away work in order to get work is I'll be talking with someone. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to disqualify anyone who cannot pay me, right? I'm going to disqualify anyone who cannot pay me, or disqualify anyone who is likely to not work with me. So these are people who, and I'm approached by lots of people to work with them. These are people who, they're not in a business type or a business vertical that I can help, right? They may be in an industry that I don't have any knowledge of, or I have very little knowledge of, right? There are certain industries I know what I need to do. I know what the numbers behind the business look like. I know what the audiences respond to. Those are the people who I can help the most. Then there are clients who they are not going to be able to pay you, right? So a lot of times as a freelancer, you're going to be approached by, I break it up into 3 levels of clients. There's, clients who are just starting up. There's, and that's like, they're just getting their feet wet into business. They expect things for low cost. They expect things for free. They want to start partnerships and not pay anything up front. They want you to have a stake in it and dedicate a lot of time and, resources into this, and maybe not get paid because they're likely to fail. There's people who are established, and then there's people who have really, really made it, right? And so I try to first pre-qualify them, right, to see if they're going to be able to pay me anyway. So I know I'm not wasting my time. After I do that, really I try to seek out and understand more specifically what problems they face in their business. And then through my communications from that point forward, I try to further flesh out what those problems are and how I can provide solutions. And then I start to sort of drip solutions to them, right? One of the ways I give them solutions is in form of, I call it a video proposal, but basically what I do is a screencast video where I look at whatever they're looking at and I give them advice in the video and make a pitch to hire me right there in the video, right? I've been very successful with that. I don't know if that answers your question, but really the key is that you have to pre-qualify, because if you don't pre-qualify on some level, you'll waste a lot of your time giving things away for free.
So when you're probably going for the people who have made it and want to stay there or up level. But for the no pants people, the people that are just starting out,
Sure.
do you recommend that they go to the established business?
Yes.
To get to the next level and still not fool with the startups?
Yeah, here's I would not fool with startups. And the reason why is that many businesses are going to fail, right? So the advantage of being a freelancer is that, and we'll talk about online businesses primarily, but this is also brick and mortar businesses. So I'm talking about online businesses primarily, mainly because I believe online businesses have actually a higher failure rate than brick and mortar businesses. But the advantage that you have as a freelancer is that you are part of a gold rush that is, the information age. And the ability of people to connect on a global scale allows businesses to reach millions and billions of people with internet advertising. So there is a gold rush going on. But the advantage is that you're not actually going out and mining for gold. You're providing the pickaxe, right? And so that's one advantage that you have, right? But the real reality is a lot of people are going to go gold mining and they're not going to find anything. So to go back to that hierarchy, right? This is why I say don't go after the lower value clients. To go after that hierarchy of clients, I really think there's a happy middle ground. And it's the client base that I've become most successful with. There are really low end or tier 1 clients who are the startup people. And a lot of them are going to fail. Then there's a middle ground. And in the middle ground client, you're looking at an established business that has a small structure, right? There aren't a lot of decision makers. There's not a giant hierarchy where a lot of people have to decide to hire you. There's not a big political process behind hiring new people. There's no HR department, right? There's no CEO, CFO, and board and, director of whatever underneath, an assistant director, and you're talking to fifth man on the totem pole. In these middle level tier 2 businesses is what I call them. You have an established business that has just 1 or 2 core decision makers that you have to convince to hire you, right? And then at the third level, there are big businesses. There are businesses with that big structure that I was just talking about. They have a CEO who has maybe a small role in day-to-day operations, but is a big visionary. They've got a board, they've got directors and assistant directors and managers and managing editors and whatever the case may be, right? So in terms of businesses that I may work for, a big brand may be one of those big CrossFit businesses or Planet Fitness, right? Then a middle of the road brand is a guy like an individual brand, like Drew Manning, Fit to Fat to Fit. He's a guy that was on TV that now sells a program, right? And he sells keto, right? And then on the low end is everybody that wants to be like him, right? But they're just starting up. So when I'm looking to target a business to say, hey, or if I was looking, I'm not looking right now, but if all of a sudden I lost all my client work and I had to say, okay, I need to get a client tomorrow, the business that I'm going to cold outreach to is going to be a business that does not have a large corporate structure. And the reason behind that is that if there is a small structure to the business, there are fewer people I have to convince to hire me. There are, less people that I have to convince of my ideas. It's a lot nicer working for less people, right? I've worked for big companies, and if you want to get something approved, you have the idea on the 1st of November, and it doesn't get approved until the 1st of January, right? Because everybody along the way, and when it is, it's not your idea anymore, because you have to sit in meeting after meeting, and everybody has to put their 2 cents in so that they feel like they've provided something, right? I don't like that as a freelancer, right? So I call them the mom and pops. And the No Pants Project, if you want an example, is an example of what I would call a mom and pop. There is one core decision maker, and that's Mike. And does he have other people who help him? Yes. Is he perhaps moving towards a model where there are other people involved, where he's bringing in consultants to help him grow the business? Sure. But at the end of the day, if you wanted to be hired by the No Pants Project, there are only a handful of people you'd have to convince to hire you, and a handful of people you'd have to convince of your ideas, right? And convince to keep you around.
So one of the things that Suzanne wants to know are some of the methods you use to pre-qualify clients to determine their probability to pay. That's a great follow-up question for this.
Yes.
So you've got an organization, 1 or 2 key decision makers,
Sure.
and then you're in front of them. What do you say to pre-qualify them? Or do you just look at the amount of time that they've been in business and almost pre-qualify before you even talk to them?
There are a few questions, and copywriters are notorious for asking this question. What's your budget? What do you normally pay? I always ask those because what's your budget for this? It tells me a lot about what their expectations are, right? So that's once I know generally what the scope is. Now, if you have not defined a project scope, so you don't know specifically the solutions you're going to provide, you're very early in the process. One of the things I look at is how much money are they spending on advertising? How much money are they spending to support their back end, right? So I usually look at advertising spend, because a company that's not spending a lot of money on advertising is not a company that has a lot of money to spend on freelancers. That's just generally the way I look at it.
Okay. So let's talk about the super big companies. I would imagine that some of those are referrals that
Mhm.
you do end up working for.
Sure.
So when it's a referral, do you want it to come from like the CEO or one of the people who's kind of up at the top to sort of shepherd you through the maze? Um, Talk to us a little bit about that.
So about getting a referral?
Yes. How do you
Um,
do it? What do you do once you get it? Um,
yeah, so referrals, I think, are the easiest way to get a client, because what we're engaged in as freelancers is a race. It's not a race, but it's a process of establishing trust and building a relationship, right? So no matter what client getting method you use, referrals, cold outreach, having a website that you run traffic to, having an email list, whatever the case may be, right? Dozens and dozens of techniques to get a client. All you're trying to do at the end of the day is establish trust and build a relationship in order to convince someone to hire you. A referral cuts down the time that's required to establish trust to like nothing, because someone that this person who wants to hire you has already has said, I trust Pete, I trust Susan, right? So I trust this person, you should hire them, right? And that immediately breaks down like 90% of the barrier to getting hired. Now all you have to do is shut up and listen for what their problems are, which is my process, right? So I think that's essential first. But what I do first is you get a referral and you say, usually they have a list of things that they need done, right? That's why they sought out a referral or someone to help and begin with, right? Because the way this happens is generally my referrals I found come from, it's a few sources. They're all people I've worked with in the past, but these people are attending conferences, they're attending masterminds, they may have a mentor or a coach in common, right, with these other business owners, or they've met this person and then they've been referred, right, and they just don't have time to do the work, so they pass them off to someone else, right? That's like if you get a referral from another copywriter, which happens. I send referrals to other copywriters send referrals to me when they're too busy. But they already have this idea of, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. So and they usually have a demand. They have a list. And so I look at their list, and then one of two things happens. I look at their list and I determine, okay, I can help them with this stuff. Maybe it's three things. I can help them with this stuff. What's next? I can't help them with this stuff. I'm not interested right away because I've looked at who they are and what their business is, and I've determined that it's just not a good fit for me. So it'd be something like, we need you to write copy in the financial whatever, and I just don't do that. Or I've looked at their list. I see they have needs. I don't want to help them with those needs, but maybe there's something else I can help them with. Right. So there's like,
that's interesting. Give
one
us
of,
an example of that. So you're redirecting the conversation from what they
sure.
think they want.
I don't know if I have a specific, it's more about the philosophy of how to do it. So recently I was approached by someone who was a referral that said, hey, need your help, was referred to you by this person. Here's a list of things that I need video sales letters for, right? Because I write video sales letters occasionally. And tell me about if you're interested in doing these things, and tell me about your rates, right? And that's all they wanted to know. They already knew I was qualified to do it because the referrer already did all the legwork for me. They said, hey, this is Pete. He's good at this. Here you go. They already basically said this guy's qualified. So I looked at the list, and it was a list of things I was not interested in. So what I did is I researched the client, I saw what they were into, and I came back and said, hey, I don't have time to do these things right now, or I'm not interested in doing these things right now, but here are my qualifications, right? So here are the areas where I have the most experience, because what I was given was a list of 4 very diverse things. So after researching the company a little bit, I determined that this person emailing me was the CEO of a company that's got their hands deep in a lot of different types of projects and a lot of different, types of things. And I thought, well, maybe at some point in the future or right now, something is crossing his desk where he needs a copywriter to work in the fields that I really know about. So I gave them a rundown of things that I really know about. I also gave them a rundown of how much I knew in the areas inside the email that I really wasn't interested in working with, but I really downplayed them and told them that I wouldn't be a good fit for those things, right? So I'm being honest with them at the same time. And I think they're recognizing, like, this is a person that's not going to BS me, right? This is a person that's not going to lead me down a path where they're just trying to convince me to hire them. And then I outlined my rates. I said, these are my rates. These are my typical rates. This is usually how much it costs. Just let me know if there's anything in the future. And that turned into a conversation where the person came back and said, oh, it's very interesting that you have experience working in these 2 fields, personal development and health, right? I'm thinking about doing this in the future, right? They just came back and had that conversation. And I said, oh, that's great news. And then so I've already pre-qualified this person. I know that they have the money to spend. I know that they're interested. And through that conversation, I've sort of figured out what they're specifically interested in. I said, if you decide to do that, here's how you should do it. And I gave them a quick email that maybe took me 30 minutes, but it was basically a plan of action that explained what was working now in this particular industry they wanted to get into and what they should do. I'm like, if you have a team in place to do this, you should do it. All of it. I gave the information dump. Anyway, it turned into a partnership, and we're forming an LLC to launch a health brand that's projected to make like 8 figures a year, right? So that's just an example, right? And so this sort of thing happens, regularly, right? I don't think I'm unique in experiencing this, right? But you kind of have to spend some time doing the legwork for this, but it pays off.
And that's also part and parcel of the reciprocity. I love your attitude.
Sure.
Of, I'm going to go in there full force. I'm going to give you all that I have. And there's a difference between underselling yourself and nickel and diming someone and looking and building strategic partnerships. And this, wow, congratulations.
Yeah. And it's not, so you say 8 figures, right? But it's like there is, on an 8-figure business, there is maybe $700,000 a year on the back end, right? Of a 10 million. So people talk about, and that's another thing that people talk about in online business, right? So in online businesses, people talk about, oh, I have a 7-figure business. Oh, I have an 8-figure business, right? That's gross, right? You've got at traffic costs, you've got fulfillment costs. So it works out, you end up, so if you have a business that's making $700,000 a year and you have a 20% stake in it, it ends up being the same amount that someone would pay you. And you don't try to just work the stake in as a copywriter. You always try to okay, base, if you're going to do an agreement like that, you're like, you're going to pay me base initially, and then we're going to do this, right? So you're getting paid something up front, but it still works out to be the same as if you're on a regular retainer agreement, right? With a lot of businesses, but it's just...
we are out of time. I want to thank you so much. I want you to answer this final question.
Sure.
So we started, and let me just remind people that we're popping in. Pete has a horrible website. It's just a placeholder. He doesn't have a website with all these bells.
Bad? You think the website's horrible?
No. It looks beautiful, but it doesn't go anywhere. There's nothing to push, and it doesn't scroll, and there's no, it's lovely, but it's like, wow. But your tagline, I write words that sell.
Yeah. Right.
What more do you have to say? Right? And Krista wrote in the comments, she said in the last 6 months, she's been working with 5 clients and she's just now getting her website up.
Right.
So you have comforted a lot of people who are worried about getting their website up.
Sure. I don't think it's something that needs to happen, right? I think, I don't think you need it. And obviously it depends on the method you're going to use to get clients, right? So if you're going to get clients with an email list, yes, you need a website, right? If you're going to get clients on LinkedIn, yes, you need a LinkedIn profile, right? Should you have a website? Probably, right? But at the end of the day, what matters is what you say to people, right? Because people don't really care about who you are until you identify what their problems are. And if, until they identify that you can help them. That's what I'm looking for. So
What you say and then what you do.
right.
Perfect. Peter Manktelow, thank you so much for joining us here on the No Pants Show. This was just absolutely brilliant. I want all of you freelancers watching to go out, take this advice, take action, fire up your freelancing business, go forth and conquer. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I had a blast.
Awesome. And if you're joining us on YouTube, head on over to Facebook. In the search bar, put in No Pants Project Open Community. Click join, answer the questions, and boom, you too will be in a freelance community of 18,000 freelancers on various stages of their freelancing career. We will see you next time on the No Pants Show. Go forth, make money. Bye.